And that's always the key. I can give you all of these tips. I can talk about all of these pieces of advice. I can give you different resources. But the bottom line, the only thing that really matters is that you are regularly using the language, listening, writing, reading, and especially speaking. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, everybody. And Merry Christmas! Happy New Year! At least if you are listening to this podcast on time, just when it comes out, then I hope you had an amazing Christmas if you celebrated it. The year is coming to an end, and I don't know about you, but even though I'm recording this in advance, right now I'm probably very full, feeling very guilty for eating so much. I'm meeting friends, family, doing all these things, and every day is kind of merging together. All of the days between Christmas and New Year's, to be honest, I lose track. I forget. Like, is it Monday? Is it Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? Is it Thursday? It all just blends together. So, if you are going through the same thing as me, well, enjoy it. Make the most of it, because this doesn't happen very often, and I believe that between Christmas and New Year's is one of the few moments when you just have fun, you indulge, you pig out, which means to eat like a pig, and you catch up with your friends. So enjoy it at the moment, but, this is also a time when people are looking ahead to the upcoming year. They're starting to think about January and starting to wonder what your New Year's resolutions could be. I like to get in there early and think about my New Year's resolutions, usually before Christmas. But when it starts to become real is right at the end of December and the first few days of January. And for many of you, if you are listening to this podcast, I'm guessing that one of your New Year's resolutions is, of course, to improve your English. Because, well, you already speak English, clearly. If you're listening to my podcast, your English is already pretty good. I'd say it's very good, personally. But one thing is having very good English understanding and English listening skills and English reading skills, which usually these passive learning skills are quite a bit easier than the active learning skills for most people, because it's much easier to watch series, to listen to podcasts, and to read the news or books than it is to actually speak and use the language in an active way. So, you're probably thinking that 2022, this coming year, is going to be the year when finally you're going to feel fluent and you're going to get fluent in English. I hope so, and I'm here to help you. So, in this podcast, I'm going to discuss different things that you can do to finally become fluent in English in 2026. So, shall we get started? Shall we get the ball rolling? I think so, and I'm going to use a little guide at the same time as I'm speaking, just to keep a structure for the podcast and give you some practical tips that you can put into action to really take your English to the next level. Let's do this. Why not? And I'll begin by sharing my screen. And the title of my notes and the title of this podcast is How to Get Fluent in English in 2026. So, a bit of an introduction, talking about the reality of fluency. So, of course, welcome back to the British English podcast with me, Lewis, and this is a show that helps you speak confident, natural British English without boring textbooks. And today, I am tackling the massive question that so many of you ask. How do I finally get fluent in English this year, in 2026? Not one day, not in a few years, but this year. So even if you're busy, even if you're starting from a lower level, even if you've tried before, yes, I'm going to give you real tips, real stories from my students, and little mini stories you can use to practice your listening and speaking. So get the kettle on, notebook ready, and let's go with the first point. And the first point is about micro fluency goals. And this is the secret to being motivated and staying motivated. Because the big major goal is to get fluent in English, or at least to feel as confident as possible when you're speaking English. But that's a very, very big objective. And it's hard to measure and quantify and assess if you are doing it or not. And you don't have a structure of what you should do each individual day. And that's where microfluency goals come in. Because as I said, most learners say, I want to be fluent. But it's too vague. We need micro goals. So what are some examples of micro goals? One of them is to tell a story about my weekend without freezing and going blank. This, I'm sure you're able to do. So we can make it more advanced. It could be tell a story about how I met my partner. Tell a story about how I began to work in a company. And then you can practice these specific little achievements and activities. Another one could be surviving a 10-minute conversation with a British person. And not a British person like me, because I'm a teacher, but a real, authentic British person. So if you are ever going to the UK and you're going to travel in the UK, you can start a conversation, start a chit chat with a randomer, with a random person. I actually watched an interesting video on Instagram that popped up on my feed yesterday. And it was about this young American guy who was in Japan, and the aim of his content was to speak to strangers in Japan until he became fluent in Japanese. And he'd literally approach usually old men who are sitting in a park and say, "Hey, do you speak Japanese? Do you mind if I practice with you?" And then he'd be practicing speaking with these random strangers that he'd never met. So, of course, this is a little bit embarrassing for many people, but it's a simple example of what you can do. Because at the end of the day, if you want to become fluent, you need to speak. And the more you speak, the better you are going to speak. Moving on. Another little micro goal could be understanding 80%, 90%, or 100% of a BBC video without subtitles, testing yourself. And that way, again, you can challenge yourself and have attainable goals, achievable goals, measurable goals. And one more would be using phrasal verbs naturally. If you follow my short videos on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram, you'll know that every single Friday I teach you 5 or more different phrasal verbs. So my advice is when you are watching these videos to try and make a note or store them in your flashcards on English with Lewis application, for example, and then review it, memorize it, and try to use them whenever there is a normal opportunity to do so with a conversation with a British person, American, Australian, or from wherever. Now, how about a little story? So, Maria, a listener from Mexico, sent me a voice message. She said, Lewis, I set one goal. I want to describe my weekend naturally using 5 expressions. So, every Sunday, she recorded herself for 2 minutes. The first week, she was hesitating, using Spanish fillers or pauses, but she kept going. So by week 3, she was using fewer pauses and 1 or 2 natural expressions like to be knackered, which means to be exhausted. And then by week 6, she told a smooth, natural story about going hiking and getting lost, using it turns out that I ended up getting lost. I couldn't be bothered to go, blah, blah, blah. And after that, she said that she realized she wasn't translating anymore. She was starting to think in English. And that is fluency. When you're thinking in English, you are reaching the beginning of fluency. But step 2, 2026. If 2025 wasn't already, 2026 definitely will be the year of AI speaking practice. Because AI, in my opinion, isn't replacing teachers. It's replacing loneliness in language learning and adding 24/7 practice at your own pace whenever you want to be able to continue practicing when maybe you're unable to speak to real people. So again, I repeat and I insist that AI is not replacing teachers. It is adding another element. It is adding more practice. It's another tool that you can use. So you can continue speaking to teachers or random native speakers, but why not use AI at the same time? Like the people who will be left behind by the AI revolution, in my humble opinion, will be the ones who don't use it, who don't actually take this technology and make the most out of it. So you now have a 24/7 speaking partner who can ask questions, correct you, explain grammar, simulate real life conversations, and help you practice pronunciation at the same time. But one of the little keys is using prompts. So, a few practical prompts that you can use is ask me a question or 10 questions about my opinion and correct every mistake. You can also ask AI to simulate a job interview and be strict. You can ask AI to pretend to be your British friend at Hub or be a hotel receptionist that you're going to check in. So these are little role plays and scenarios that you can practice with ChatGPT, with Gemini, or with English with Lewis app. Because, as I have told you, I have developed my own application which involves an AI chatbot with my voice, so you can practice with AI, but sounding like me. And during the conversation, you can make flashcards, which you can then review, and you can also search new words and phrases that you can add to flashcards as well. And it has a streak, so it'll keep you consistent, and a leaderboard, so you can compare yourself with other people to see who is using it as often as possible. So check out English with Lewis app. But now let's go on to a little story. And the story is about David's new career. So David is from Brazil and used AI for 15 minutes each morning. And he worked in customer service, but only in Portuguese. So he told his AI, be an angry hotel guest, and I'll respond in English. Therefore, He practiced apologizing, offering solutions, staying calm, using British polite expressions like, I completely understand your frustration. So what happened? Well, 3 months later, his manager said, we're adding an English speaking department. Would you like to join? And of course, he jumped at the opportunity and accepted it. So as a result, he doubled his salary. He earned twice as much money. And all of this was from the principle of little and often using AI. Because everybody, we've all got our phones right next to us at all times. So whenever you have these dead times in the day, when you're a bit bored or you're not sure what to do, you can use your AI app, whether that's English with Lewis, ChatGPT, or anything else. Make the most of these little breaks in your routine to keep taking your English to the next level and keep practicing, because as I always say, the more you speak, the better you will speak. Point number 3, immersion, story immersion. And this is the fluency multiplier, because people remember stories. They don't usually remember grammar tables. Stories have this knack or talent of being memorable, which is why I like to tell short stories from time to time. And it's why reading books in English is such a great way of improving. Again, because stories give you rhythm, emotion, characters, real life vocabulary, and some cultural contexts as well. But with stories, how do you practice to become fluent? Well, listen to the story, and ideally, if you can read and listen at the same time, I tend to think that it makes it more memorable, so that way it's more beneficial. So listening and reading to a short story is fantastic. And then I challenge you to retell it, to see if you remember what the story said, and retell the story in your own words. Then another point you can try is changing some details. So if you don't remember exactly what happened at different stages of the story, well, you can switch it up. You can mix it up. You can change things ever so slightly, maybe with the ending, maybe with a twist. And you can add your own details to make the story, fun, funny, unusual, entertaining, and interesting. So how about a little story? And this very short story is about Tom and the missed bus. So last Wednesday, Tom missed his bus. Again. But instead of sprinting after it, he decided to do something different. He told himself, right, for the next 10 minutes, I'm only speaking English. So he narrated everything. He'd look around at what he could see, and he could see, ooh, the sky looks gloomy today. It's funny because today here, it is very gloomy, very dark, very cloudy. So I'm using a light again because winter is here and the lighting in winter isn't very good. But anyway, continuing. The sky looks gloomy today. That bloke, that man, is definitely running late. Run late is to be late. Oh, there's a dog over there and it's wagging its tail. That dog's having the time of its life. And then you might think, oh, okay, I'm getting a bit peckish now. That means I'm getting a little bit hungry now. So this is a practical little thing that you can do whenever you are waiting for something or walking around. You can look at what you see look at what people are doing, and try to describe what you can see in English. Again, just to make the most of these little dead times. As a consequence, by the time he got to the next bus stop, he'd done 10 minutes of effortless English practice without sitting at a desk. So, you guys can do the same. You can practice doing the same thing, or even make up your own stories when you see two people who are chatting, meeting up. You can, well, make up a story. Think, oh, I wonder how they met. I wonder what they have in common. I wonder if they are brother and sisters, or boyfriend or girlfriend, or boss and employee. You can allow your imagination to go wild and describe things, even if it's in your mind, in English. But the fourth point, you want to sound like a native. Now, I'm not referring to the accent. Accents will always be different, and you can be proud of your accent. It's not something to be ashamed of. Just having an accent in English means that you have made an effort to learn the language. Many native English speakers don't make any effort to learn another language. So you are already ahead of them in this way, in this aspect. So you shouldn't be ashamed of your accent. And that's not what I mean by sound like a native. What I mean is learning chunks, like fixed phrases and expressions, not singular words. Because fluency isn't remembering vocabulary, it's remembering chunks, groups of words that are used together. So, what are some examples of chunks? Maybe I'm used to. I'm used to working from home. I'm used to fasting. I'm used to living in Brussels. Or I was wondering if you could help me. I was wondering if you knew blah, blah, blah. I was wondering if you have listened to all of my podcasts. So these chunks, in addition to the two I've used as an example, we could memorize, do you mind if, or to be honest with you, or at the end of the day, blah, blah, blah. So learning these chunks of languages and putting them in flashcards will always help you to memorize language and words rather than just doing it with individual words. So, natural upgrades that you can use. I didn't have motivation. This is perfectly correct. But it sounds more natural to say, I couldn't be bothered. I couldn't be bothered to go to the gym yesterday. Another natural upgrade could be, I'm very busy. Again, this is perfectly correct. But you could also say, oof, I've got a lot on. Like, I've got a lot on my plate at the moment. And one more, I'm very tired. This is perfect. But you could also say, I'm absolutely knackered. I'm absolutely shattered. And these are more native chunks. They're very British and they're very real as well. So when you speak to different native speakers, using these alternatives will make you stand out a lot more compared with just using the basic words and phrases. Now, the fifth point, and it is the 3-voice rule. Because to become fluent, you need 3 voices every week. What do I mean by that? What am I getting at? Well, the first one is a clear native voice that you might hear on podcasts, such as this one, audiobooks as well, and the news. All very clear native voices. But you also need to practice with a messy native voice. This is more like vloggers, live streams, TikTok, and above all, real conversations, because this is how people really speak. Now I'm recording this podcast, I'm speaking slowly, I'm speaking clearly, I'm using different phrases, but when I'm speaking with my friends and my family, I tend to be a bit messier in the way that I speak because it's a natural conversation. So I'd be like, "Oh, what's going on? How you doing? Yeah, I'm Lewis. Oh, yeah, you had a good time." I don't enunciate, I don't vocalize quite as much, but it's real and it's natural. And then the third voice is, well, of course, your own voice. So you need to work on your own voice. You need to record yourself and hear your progress. Now, I don't know about you, but on WhatsApp, when people send me a voice note of 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, whew, I think to myself, really? Do I have to listen to that? Could he not have just told me by message? But it is a very good way of practicing your language skills. Even with my Spanish, which is very good, I can send people a voice note and I'll kind of forget what I wanted to say, or I'll mumble a little bit and I won't be clear when I'm speaking. So this is one of the easiest things that you can do to practice your speaking is sending voice notes. If you've got any friends who speak English, tell that friend, hey, let's have a chat using voice notes. Because genuinely, you'll realize what you're lacking, what you're missing in the language, and you'll review new words and phrases, and maybe even use these natural alternatives that I told you about before, or other phrasal verbs. So record yourself, listen to yourself if you can handle it as well. And if not, the important thing is just recording yourself and sending the message. Let me know if you already do this, because, yeah, I think it's a good tip. And a little story about this, and it's about Laura. So, Laura from Colombia hated her voice in English. And she told me, Lewis, it sounds foreign. I don't sound like me. I don't sound like myself. So, what I did was I told her to record herself every day for 30 days, even 30 seconds. Everybody has an app on their phone that they can do this with. So on day 1, perhaps you sounded a little bit awkward. Day 10, fewer pauses, more natural and more flow. Day 20, even more natural rhythm. So by the end of the month, she said, this is me in English. It's not perfect, but it's fluent enough to get my message across, and it's me. And that's fluency, really, being able to express yourself with your accent and with your own peculiarities in the language, but feeling confident and feeling like it's not a huge effort to use the language. Now, the next point is making English part of your identity, part of who you are. Because true fluency doesn't come from study time. It comes from who you are, your identity. You become an English using person who listens to English daily, thinks in English, chats with friends in English, reads English news, watches English content, and learns new expressions naturally. As you know, I live in Brussels, and there are so many people from different nationalities, different countries, and all of them speak English to varying degrees. Now, some of them may need my help, and some of them could do with some of my classes, because they will sometimes learn mistakes from other non-native speakers, and they will pick up incorrect conversation from other non-native speakers, and they don't use a lot of phrasal verbs or idioms or expressions. But all that being said, they do have an English identity. They are able to use English effectively. They can use it at work. They can use it to socialize. And maybe they should try to perfect their English a little bit more and keep improving it. But once you reach an upper intermediate level, it's kind of up to you if you want to make an active effort to keep improving your English language skills or just settle for what you have. And that's perfectly understandable. But the reason why they have got to a point where they're good enough in English is because they have this habit and this identity of using the language. They'll listen to things, they'll use it randomly, they'll chat to other people who maybe don't speak their language. And they'll learn English by osmosis almost. Not perfect English, don't get me wrong, don't misunderstand me, but they'll get to a point where they can use the language because they have an English identity. So if you're not already doing this, which I assume you are, to be honest, you can have a little challenge for 1 week or 1 month to make English the first thing you hear every morning. A little podcast, a motivational message, a quick story, a bit of British radio. It trains your brain to say, today and every day, English matters. You don't have to study it, but you have to use it, and you have to be exposed to it as often as possible. And number 7, this is something I am an expert in, and it is join communities. Even if you're shy, even if you're timid, because fluency I'll repeat myself. Fluency comes from connection, having a connection and using the language. So nowadays, with 2026 around the corner, what we have is WhatsApp speaking clubs, Discord groups, Zoom meetups, English gaming communities, AI voice chat spaces, online conversation cafes, language exchanges, or just meetups with people who are into the same hobbies as you. If, like me, you like football, you can start going to the pub and watching football with English speakers. You can join a club where you will discuss your hobby with other international people who will surely speak English as the modern kind of, what's it called? The generic language, the lingua franca, that's what it's called. Because English is the universal language, whether you like it or not. It is the lingua franca. And whilst we're speaking about communities, you need to know, if you don't already know, that I do have my own speaking classes with a group subscription where you pay monthly €60 to join my speaking classes. All of them are small groups for B1, B2, C1 plus levels. Every week we discuss a different topic that I often cover on the podcast as well. And I'm the teacher all the time, so you'll get to see me a couple of times per week and practice your English. And don't worry if you're shy. I'm shy as well. My cheeks go bright red sometimes. But if you have enough courage to overcome the immediate, perhaps, embarrassment of speaking to strangers in English, then I guarantee that you will get so many benefits out of it. But moving on to a little story. 2 students who cooked together. So 2 of my students, Aisha from Saudi Arabia and Matteo from Italy, joined one of my speaking groups, and they realized they both cooked dinner at the same time every night. So they started doing a 10-minute English chat while chopping vegetables. And they did this every night. So after 2 months, Aisha's accent softened, Matteo stopped translating, and they sounded more natural, and they made a habit that stuck. They could stick to this habit. So fluency grows in routine, not textbook. And this is another big message from this podcast and how you can become fluent in 2026. And it is finding a routine, finding a way that works for you so you can stick to it. You can continue doing it all year long. You can keep speaking, watching, listening to things every day or every other day in the long term. We can compare language learning to going to the gym or going on a diet, because people can go to the gym for a month and work out and get fitter. But then if they're exhausted at the end of the month and they've run out of motivation, then it's useless. There's no point. The same thing happens with diets. If you go on a diet that is really, really intense and you lose weight, then sooner or later, you're going to get sick of it. You're going to become tired of the diet and you will binge after, meaning that you will pig out to kind of say goodbye to the diet that you've just done. So again, find a routine, find a habit that works for you, that is enjoyable, so you can make it as consistent as possible over time in the long run. Now, number 8, a topic that we have practiced before and I think is really useful to improve your pronunciation. It is shadowing. And this is the imitation method that actually works. So shadowing is brilliant. And if you do it correctly, what you would do is choose a short clip, maybe 10, 20 seconds, or even longer. Listen to it with full attention, and then shadow it. So copy the rhythm, copy the tone, copy the emotion, and repeat it again and again. And you can even record yourself to prepare. And a more practical way of doing it, perhaps, if you want to do it over a long period of time, is watching these podcast videos. And nowadays, I've made the decision to always add the subtitles. And the subtitles appear bit by bit as I'm speaking. So something you could do is mute me or turn the volume right down and watch the video of the subtitles and see if you can read along with me and see if you can kind of say what I'm saying whilst reading the subtitles and pretend you're me for a second. I guarantee that it's maybe hard work, but it's worth it. So give it a go. And you can use a mini dialogue in the podcast. Speaker 1 might say, "Fancy grabbing a bite later?" And speaker 2 would say, "Yeah, why not? I could do with a break." So, in this case, you can practice repeating this dialogue of how I pronounce it as well. And it builds natural pronunciation faster than any trick. Now, the last 2 points. Keep a fluency journal. So, this could be online on your phone, or it could be literally with a notebook and a pen. But the important thing is not to write boring lists. So what you should do is write as follows. 3 expressions I actually used today. A mistake I made and how I corrected it. Something I understood today that I wouldn't have understood last year. And a moment I felt proud of. So at the end of the day or at the end of the week, you can assess your progress and think, okay, what new words, phrases, and expressions have I learnt this week? And write them down. What mistake have I made this week and how have I corrected it? Again, write it down and it'll make it more memorable. What's a moment that I understood or I managed to do today that I wouldn't have done last year? And what do you feel proud of? So just having these little moments of assessing your progress will help you stay motivated and keep going. This is something that I personally never do, but I think it is a good idea. If you're the kind of person who enjoys writing a diary or a journal, then this is right up your street. Now, the final point is, of course, stop translating and start feeling the language. Obviously, this is easier said than done, and there is no magical trick to be able to do it. But, you know, the more you immerse yourself in the language, the more you will stop translating and you will start feeling the language. So let's use a little bit of Spanish. For example, wind down. Last night when I finished my classes, I took some time to wind down. And wind down is like relajarse, which means to relax. So don't associate relajarse with wind down. Associate it with what you see around you. So when you think of wind down, you think of soft lights, a sofa, a warm drink, and a feeling of relaxing after work. This is how native speakers and babies, when they're learning languages, store words. They will store it emotionally. So whenever you learn a new word or phrase, see if you can think of a story or connections to make this more memorable only using English rather than translating from your mother tongue, whether that's Spanish, French, Italian, or whatever it could be. So to finish off, this is your 2026 Fluency Blueprint. And if you forget everything else, remember this. Fluency in 2026 is built from tiny habits, emotional stories, immersive tools, and real conversations, not perfection. So the bottom line is not to study English, but to live in English. And that's always the key. I can give you all of these tips. I can talk about all of these pieces of advice. I can give you different resources. But the bottom line, the only thing that really matters is that you are regularly using the language, listening, writing, reading, and especially speaking. So, I think that's a good way to call it a day and finish this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you had a fantastic Christmas as well. And if you're listening to this before New Year's, Happy New Year, have an amazing day, and I'll see you in 2026. Lots of love, and see you next time. Bye!